Da Five Bloods is the new Spike Lee joint. Spike Lee coming off of his critically acclaimed film, Black Klansman, which I still haven't seen, and I hate myself for that because I heard it was wonderful, and it has some of my favorite actors. This movie is getting wonderful reviews. People are digging on Da Five Bloods. It's a film that deals with the issue of race, which is something that is currently and should always be a very relevant topic in America. So I'm glad that people are connecting with it. I didn't enjoy it. I'm sorry. I didn't particularly like it. There are things in it that are good, even great, and I'm going to start by talking about those. I really liked all these performances, especially at the beginning. I loved seeing these guys interact with one another. Their connection felt so real. It really did feel like these guys had known each other forever, and you got that. In the beginning, I was really enjoying it. I was digging their camaraderie. They had a lot of chemistry, and I was looking forward to seeing where the movie was going to go from there. This film is well directed for the most part. Spike Lee is a veteran director. His films always look good. There's always clear effort put into every film. This is a film that had real effort put into that, and in an industry and a medium that has so little effort put into it sometimes, I do have to applaud this movie for having a director behind the helm who really cared about the product he was making. Also, one of my favorite character actors, Paul Walter Hauser, shows up in this movie. Paul Walter Hauser, Michigan native. We stole every scene he was in I, Tonya. Should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Richard Jewell. He was phenomenal in that movie. He shows up here and has a small part, but even in the little bit that he's in, you like watching the guy on screen. He has a lot of charisma. But the biggest compliment that people are giving this movie, and understandably so, is that Delroy Lindo, who's been a character actor for a long time, you've seen him in stuff before. When you see his face, you'll be like, oh, that guy. He's the main character, essentially, of this movie, and he gives the performance of his lifetime. He is mesmerizing in this movie. He should, and he will get nominated for an Academy Award, assuming, of course, we have an Academy Awards this year. He's sensational, and I give him a ton of credit. He put his all into this performance. All these guys did. I have no complaints about any of these performances. They're all really good. That's sadly where my compliments end. On to the complaints. This movie is 2.5 hours long, and I shit you not, you could have cut a full hour out of this thing and missed nothing. Nothing. This is not a bad story. In fact, it's quite an interesting story. It's a relevant story. It's a fascinating story, but it is not a story that is interesting or complex enough to warrant an epic runtime. Honestly, it reminded me of The Irishman in that sense. The Irishman is an objectively very well-made film, but it does not have a story that is interesting enough to warrant this epic runtime. I've brought this up before. It bothers me when directors don't understand that epic is scope. Epic is not length, and I am not opposed to long movies. Some of my favorite movies are 2.5, 3 hours. But you need to make sure that you have a story and you have characters that are interesting enough to warrant such a long runtime, because if you don't, I'm gonna complain about it. And that's what I'm doing here. The length really works against it because this movie meanders so much that once you get to the third act, once things kind of go down, you forget the plot. You forget what they're even after. And it's not particularly gripping. There's zero tension. There's zero suspense. I brought up that Spike Lee did a good job directing this movie, and he did in terms of cinematography and shot composition, but in terms of creating tension, there's nothing here. By the time you got to the third act, I didn't care, particularly even know what was going on, because the movie just meanders. But the biggest issue I have with this film is that it makes an attempt to address political and race issues, and I have no problem with that. I think that is important, and I think that can be done extremely well. But as is typical with a Spike Lee joint, it's done with about as much subtlety as a sledgehammer to the scrotum. Delroy Lindo's character in this movie is a Trump supporter. Now, there is a way you could have made that really interesting. There's a way that you could have made that nuanced and subtle. But it's essentially the equivalent of Spike Lee jumping up and down, holding two rattles, going, I don't like Trump! I don't like him! And guess what? I don't like him either. I think he's a fool. Believe what you want to believe politically, that's fine. Politics are much like film. It is extremely subjective. I'm not a fan of him. But if you're going to address that in a movie, which every movie seems to be doing nowadays, that's another thing that guy's ruined, is that every director feels like they have to shoehorn politics into their movies. Make it a dialogue, not a monologue, please. Have some subtlety, please. You know what you should do next time? How about you tell a story? How about you make a movie about these guys who went through hell, who were treated like garbage, as many vets, especially African-American vets, were when they returned from Vietnam? How about you tell a story about that instead of using that story as a showcase to push forward your political agenda? And what's frustrating is that it's a political agenda I agree with. I share Spike Lee's views on politics. But to put these politics in a movie with no subtlety, it's safe. It adds nothing new. The movie Jojo Rabbit was a film that took a very dark period in history, added humor, added subtlety, added satire, and gave us a new twist on a very familiar message. Here, it's just Spike Lee regurgitating a social viewpoint that you could see by some schmuck on Twitter. And I know this is going to be a controversial review, because I know there's going to be a lot of people who even love this movie, and that's fine. I didn't enjoy it at all, and it's probably going to get nominated for awards, but I encourage people who like this, watch it again and pay close attention to the narrative. Pay attention to what he's actually trying to say. Pay attention to how just remarkably clunky this movie is narratively, because it has the emotional depth of a chocolate chip cookie. Even if you agree with the message, which I do, I could read that message off of a Hallmark card. It's a muddled, if not really well-intentioned and well-acted film. You know, I had this at a 5 out of 10. I'd even finished this review and was editing it, but I had to go back and just say, I gotta change it. It's a 4 out of 10. I didn't really enjoy it much at all. There are some things in it that are really good, and it is admittedly better than anything I've watched recently, but I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. I would definitely never watch this movie again, so it's a 4. While you're at it, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. The link is in the description for this video, and click that subscribe button, click that like button, comment, let me know what you thought of this movie, let me know what you thought of this review. Let's get that subscriber count and that view count up to the moon, baby. I'll be back here probably tomorrow with the last movie review of the weekend for The King of Staten Island. I will see you guys soon.